Let's bring in our CBS News chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes, who is live from the White House. Nancy, what are you hearing about these decisions and any potential reaction from the White House, if there is any yet?
Well, Adriana, I expect that the president will have something to say about mail-in voting, which she has been railing against for years, and really dredging up suspicions about whether there's some kind of fraud involved, never presenting any evidence. And this has been something that has really divided the president from some members of his party. After all, mail-in voting has long been a strength for the Republican Party. And so it made Republican officials uncomfortable many years ago when the president started arguing that people needed to vote in person, that they shouldn't vote by mail, that there was something suspicious about it. At this point, he has been doing it for so long that Republican officials have stopped trying to change his mind on this front, even though he continues to claim that there is fraud, that exists not just in mail-in voting, but in other forms of voting as well. And that's part of the reason that he is pushing for legislation in Congress that would require voter ID in order for people to vote in person as well.
You know, what's interesting, Nancy, to me is the question of elections integrity is one that has been frequently raised by the president over the course of the last decade. And as you and I know, oftentimes elections are solid when he or the candidate that he endorses wins, and they are rigged when he, as he did in 2020, loses, and when people that he likes or supports lose as well. And so all of that injection into the populace has led to the point where we are now. But it is interesting that the Supreme Court, in ruling the way it did, it took one key aspect of what the president says is a problem with our elections and says, no, it's not. Or at least they're not deciding that they're not going to rule in favor of the president's point of view.
Right. And I think that simply underscores that despite all of the lawsuits that the president brought after he lost his bid for re-election in 2020, he and his legal team were never able to prove that there was any widespread fraud. And it really sort of takes me back, Vlad, to the days after he lost his bid. And I was talking to Republicans on Capitol Hill, most of whom had won their bid for re-election, and asking them, do you believe that there was fraud in the election? And they really all had to tiptoe quite carefully, because they didn't want to look like they were disagreeing with the president, even as they said, no, I think my race was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But what about the president's race? Oh, well, he has some beliefs, and that'll be litigated in court. And so it has been a challenge for elected Republican officials who, after all, do control the House, do control the Senate, they do control the White House, and yet they have been supporting the president when he claims that there is widespread fraud and that it's hurting his party somehow.
Yeah. Nancy Cordes, stand by for us at the White House. We'll obviously come to you if there's reaction from the White House or the president. But let's bring back Rebecca Roiphe, our legal analyst, who's here with us in the studio. So one of the questions that seems to weave itself throughout this opinion, Rebecca, is the issue of federalism. And the court noted already that dozens of states have different ballot receipt deadlines, and the majority is essentially saying that unless Congress says otherwise, they're going to leave it to the states to decide how to do that. Is that your interpretation?
Yes, absolutely. And, in this federalism conversation, we used to have a situation in which conservatives were very pro states' rights. And you're seeing a little bit of a shift in terms of that in certain contexts. Perhaps this is one of them, at least, in terms of the president's rhetoric about voting and how he wants to control elections. But as a general matter, conservatives tend to like to allow states to experiment with different laws and rules governing certain areas, especially something like voting that has just been traditionally something that states have really had control over in this particular way.
So the other thing that I think is interesting, we haven't talked a lot about the dissent, and it does appear that as is, I guess, the norm, that the dissent has a fundamentally different view of what Election Day means as we were talking about it, which is Alito is arguing that the election includes the receipt of those ballots received on Election Day. I guess the question for me is which is more consistent with election law precedent, the dissent or the majority?
I think the dissent, I mean, and again, I'm sort of reading this in real time, but as much as I can tell from the dissent, I think that it's trying to do a kind of originalist type reading here, and also a policy argument to say that this is a bad idea from a policy perspective. We don't, it creates a sense of illegitimacy, a concern about elections being stolen, and I think the majority is dismissing that as, again, this is not our role. I mean, sure, possibly, but that's not how we need to read this statute. We need to read the plain language of the statute, and especially in light of, as you say, what the practice has been, which is, so many states having these practices whereby they don't have all the election ballots counted on election day.